Hey everyone, I am Emma Handy, and I am doing some videos here on StarCityGames.com today. Hopefully the first of many. I am going to be working with a deck that I've got a lot of experience with at this point. It's the Modern Gift Storm, the blue-red variant specifically. Some versions of the deck you'll see, I've seen some splashing white and some splashing black as well, but I've become pretty partial towards just your streamlined blue-red version. Let's go ahead and just jump on into the deck tech, talking about why I've made some of the card selections I have. This list is not very different from what I played at the Open in Richmond a few weeks ago. I came pretty close to a top 16 finish. Just kind of locked out of the top 8 by a draw. Overall, a lot of it's just kind of seasoning to taste more than anything. I have the 18th land in the deck. Sometimes you'll see 17. I just really like hitting land drops, and I think that it's pretty important to do so in your control matchups. And with Rossum starting to do so well with Jessica on the SCG Tour, Kevin Jones talking about it a bunch, you're really starting to see an increase of the spell queller decks and making sure that you can cast your spells, multiple spells specifically, those in those games is really important. I've kind of got the spells here separated by type or what role they play in the deck. So first off, we have our enablers. These are kind of our cards that either bridge us over to comboing or they make our combo work. So here we have our cantrips specifically. We got our Serum Visions and our Sleight of Hands, which help dig for things. Same with Peer Through Depths. It's kind of just the 9th cantrip. We could play a Peek in this spot. We could also play Peek over the Remands. Either way, they're both kind of just cantrips with their own spin on it or their own drawbacks. Remand is only a cantrip if another spell is being cast, is kind of the drawback. It has a lot of upside in that, one, it can undo an opponent's turn, just do Remand things. But on the other side of that, it can actually help you win without having to resolve a Past in Flames. There are a lot of situations where you'll storm up to, say they're at 15, they've gone Fetch, Shock, plus Shock. You only have to storm up to 7 if you have a Grape Shot and a Remand. You can Grape Shot, you'll get 6 copies, then Remand your own Grape Shot, so they'll take 6. Then your storm count has gotten up to 9 if you cast the next Grape Shot, because you cast your first Grape Shot and now the Remand. So then you 9 them, and it ends up being 15 without you ever having to resolve a Past in Flames. It's great against Rest in Peace, against Nile Spellbomb, the main deck Relica Progenitus decks. You end up coming up with a lot of scenarios where being able to Remand your own spells comes up more than one would think. Remand also plays quite well with Baral and Electromancer. It's just giving you a 1-mana way to interact. If you are able to just play one on, say, turn 3, have your other mana up, you can then Remand the removal spell, and then, presumably go off when it comes back around to you. Finally, the last thing in the enabler slot is Noxious Revival. This is something I originally was not very high on, but someone in one of the comment sections of the first article I wrote about the deck really recommended it, said it was great, really helped them just pull off wins that shouldn't be possible otherwise. I decided to kind of give it a shot, see how it ended up working, and was very impressed. Card helps a lot with your gifts piles, particularly the ones where you just need, say, to get 2 rituals. You can get Pyretic Ritual, Desperate Ritual, Manamorphose, Noxious Revival, and then even if they give you, say, Manamorphose, Noxious Revival, you can then Noxious Revival one of the rituals on top of your deck, Manamorphose to draw the ritual, and so on. It's a way to end up netting mana with your Gifts Ungiven and going off there. At times, it also just helps you go off when you aren't even mid-combo. It just, because we have a high concentration of fetch lands, I believe it's 7 out of our 18 total lands, that's 4 turns, 2 deltas, and a strand. You can Noxious Revival a land on top to help you hit a land drop. You could even do it to put a Remand on top if you're playing, it's one of the big mana decks, your Tron, your Primeval Titan decks, something there. It just gives you some redundancy, and it also makes your sideboard cards a lot better. We only have 1 Echoing Truth, but this kind of can act as a second copy if it ends up being great in the matchup. I could sing the praise of Noxious Revival all day, but in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and move on. Next up is your rituals. These are just kind of what our deck is doing. That's how Storm tends to function, is a bunch of, something that produces a bunch of mana or produces mana and costs less mana than it produces, and it lets you cast a bunch of spells in one turn. We have our, what I just call them bears. Some people call them medallion bears. I have a friend who calls them familiars after I believe it's the plane shift familiars that reduce the cost of your spells that are really popular in Pauper. These are kind of the thing that make your deck really just go over the top. It turns your Pyretic and Desperate rituals effectively into Dark rituals, costing 1 mana and generating 3. Manamorphose into just the best ritual ever printed. It produce mana and draw cards. And then turns Past in Flames into a pseudo Yawgmoth's Will. But better in this deck. Can't really sing enough praises of these. I have the full 8 because in my experience your most busted draws involve having one of these. So I kind of, instead of having the 7 that you'll see in some lists, I have 8 to kind of just overload on them so you can have more draws where you have the jam one of them on 2, they tap out to kill it, jam another one and start ritualing on 3 to win. I really just try to maximize that sort of play pattern, and having 8 lines up with that. I have 3 Grape Shots and 0 Empty the Warrens in the main deck because I just want to be a more streamlined combo deck. In general, I think that game 1 with a combo strategy, it's generally going to be a bit better rather than trying to hedge your bets on multiple kill conditions if you're an engine type of combo deck like this one that doesn't really have a backup fair game, to kind of just commit to a certain strategy rather than having a Grape Shot and an Empty the Warrens where you might empty for 8 and then Grape Shot them for 9, and then that just kind of means that your Empty the Warrens wasn't good enough to kill them, but your Grape Shot wasn't good enough to kill them either. So you just have to hope they can't answer Grape Shot or Empty the Warrens, which is a little bit sketchy in my experience. Finally, we have the namesake of the deck. That's just the Gifts Ungiven. This card ends up in this deck because we have Past in Flames is usually just search your deck for 4 cards, have access to all of them. You might not put all of them in your hand, but you do end up with a lot of situations where, because of Past in Flames, you're just getting 3 instants and sorceries and a Past in Flames, and no matter what, you're going to get to cast all of them, and your opponent might mess up and give you the wrong 2 cards, but generally speaking, it's you're just choosing which foot they want to shoot themselves in. Moving on to the sideboard, 1 copy of Echoing Truth. I really want the second one, but our sideboard is really tight in my opinion. It's just kind of a catch-all that helps you answer your Leyline of Sanctities, your Grafdigger's Cages, all these problematic hate cards that you'll see post-board. Unless you know the opponent's jamming a bunch of artifacts specifically and no enchantments, we're going to be bringing in an Echoing Truth post-board as kind of a just-in-case. We can either grab it with a Gifts Ungiven, or we can find it with Peer Through Depths, or we can just draw it. Worst case scenario, a lot of the decks in Modern right now are playing bigger creatures. Your Reality Smashers, your Primeval Titans, even your Tarmogoyfs or your Gurmag Anglers are all not exciting, but respectable things to be Echoing Truthing, just to sort of make it do a sort of time lock impression. Next up on the list is Shattering Spree. It's the reason I mentioned the artifact caveat with Echoing Truth is if you know they're just on a bunch of artifact hate cards, Eldrazi Tron kind of falls under that umbrella. If you know that's the case, you're just going to want to be on Shattering Sprees. Shattering Spree is our artifact hate card of choice. 1, because we're able to make a lot of red mana with our rituals, but 2, it's the way that we can actually get through Chalice of the Void. It's not uncommon for Chalice decks, if they draw multiples, to go Chalice on 1 and then Chalice on 2. So Vandal Blast is not reasonable. We kind of have to go ahead and give that one the axe. A Shattering Spree, if you replicate it, can get through a Chalice on 1. The original will be countered, but the copy won't. Shattering Spree destroys Chalice on 2 if all they have is a Chalice for 2, and Byforce doesn't, so that's why we can't play the Byforce. And then past that, we're kind of looking at Shattering Spree, Shatter Storm, which is the 4 mana option, is not really something we can do because we can't combo the same turn we play it as effectively, so that just kind of narrows it down to Shattering Spree. Swan Song is the the anti-spell card of choice in the deck. I know Kazuneguri recently won the Open in Richmond with Dispels in his board over Swan Songs. We talked about it actually between rounds a little bit, and I'm still pretty strong on Swan Song because it can counter both Eidolon of the Great Revel and Eidolon of Rhetoric. There are also some sorceries that end up being relevant that it can counter, but it being able to hit, Rest in Peace, Scape Shift even, just really makes Swan Song valuable. And there's a not zero number of post-board games if you're on the Empty the Warrens plan where you'll Swan Song your own spells in order just to make a 2/2 flyer to kind of apply a bit more pressure. And I get it's a corner case, but it does end up happening more than one would think. And the frequency at which it happens makes me not think the 2/2s is a whole lot of a drawback in the matchups where you want this type of effect anyway. Pieces of the Puzzle is kind of just a different style of card advantage engine than Gifts Ungiven. In some matchups where they play a lot of Graveyard Hate, Gifts Ungiven is not actually that great for us just because there are cards that are significantly more important than other ones, and because our deck is so redundant, it's hard for us to pick 4 great cards with Gifts Ungiven or get the one card that we need. And that equates to us just not being able to pick the card, because if we do pick it, and they put it in our graveyard and then use Graveyard Hate, that means we're just not going to have access to it. This is, say if it's an Echoing Truth. Or if we take one of our 2 Shattering Sprees out of the equation, all of a sudden we just have reduced our odds of finding the best card in our deck by a pretty significant amount. On the other side of it, Pieces of the Puzzle is a lower chance of actually finding those cards, but if it does find those cards, you get to keep them, and that is an enormous deal. If you can hit 3 lands, this is basically just a divination that always hits gas, and that is fantastic. Lightning Bolt is one of our interactive spells of choice. The only real change I'm not sure about in this deck is I'm not sure if I want 3 bolts and 1 dismember or 2 bolts and 2 dismembers. Right now I like the 3 bolts. I just think that drawing multiple dismembers in a single game is a little bit rough. The life cost is very real in this deck, but Dismember being able to hit Thought-Knot Seer and Gurmag Angler is a very real consideration that comes up more frequently than I'd like to admit. Lightning Bolt being a free way to kill Spell Quellers, though. Not a free way, but a way that doesn't cost life against the Bolt Snap Helix deck is very, very relevant. That's the biggest thing about it. Lightning Bolt's also a lot better to flash back with a Past in Flames than a Dismember is for the life payment reason I just mentioned. Finally, the last couple things we have are Empty the Warrens and Blood Moon. Empty the Warrens is just a way we can diversify our kill conditions a bit if we think it's going to be harder to Grape Shot them. There are a lot of games where we're going to board out a Grape Shot and a Past in Flames because they'll either have Graveyard Hate or they're a Leyline of Sanctity deck. So we're going to need a different way to push through damage. Empty the Warrens is a great way to do that. It also kind of forces to keep them honest by making them keep in Supreme Verdict, Is It Staticaster, Anger the Gods, Engineered Explosives, all these sweepers that are not great. But if they don't have them in their deck, they'll lose to Empty the Warrens. But then if we don't draw the Empty the Warrens, they have these dead cards in their deck. So Empty kind of makes them walk a tightrope and try to figure out what angle of attack they need to be fighting us on or what axis they need to combat. And finally, we have Blood Moon. This is a very different style of using Blood Moon than what most people think of when they look at Blood Moon. A lot of times when people look at Blood Moon, they kind of think of the lock someone out of the game, make them unable to cast their spells forever type of prison-styled thing. You'll see out of Red-White Prison. You'll see it sometimes out of the Scred Red decks. Those styles of strategies tend to plan to just blank a bunch of the opponent's cards and then eventually win. What we're planning to do with Blood Moon is kind of turn it into a way to buy us time. It's much closer to a time walk effect of sorts, where we just want to get 2 or 3 extra turns of development out of a Blood Moon. They might be able to cast 1 spell a turn that way, but they're only able to cast 1 spell a turn that way, and it forces them in this position of develop their board or be able to answer our combo. And if they're choosing to answer our combo, then they're not actually working towards killing us. And because we have so many ways to just put basic islands on the board, and we can generate so much mana out of nowhere, a lot of times if they only have 1 response under a Blood Moon, we can just play through that and be okay. So, that mostly covers a lot of my individual card decisions in the deck. Stick around and join me for the first round that I play. See you in a second.